financial services industry is changing with demands to make it more inclusive. With me is Brett Scott, financial activist and economic hacker. So Brett, let's start with the Occupy movement. Now this gives macro level critique of structural flaws in our economic and social systems. And you say a new world of financial activism is coming. But can the little people really make a difference? And do the big financial institutions care what they think? And more importantly, should they care?
Large financial intermediaries rely on small people. For example, people support banks with their deposits, people support the investment management industry with their pensions. So actually a large part of the power dynamic in the financial sector is between a kind of diffuse group of lots of people who then support these sort of centralized intermediaries who have lots of power. And the question is, when you think about financial reform, is how do you mobilize the power of the diffuse ordinary people in society to actually balance and contest the power of financial institutions? And I think people are trying to work out ways of how you do that now.
Perhaps the crux of the matter is that they just don't understand financial systems. I think you used the phrase financially illiterate.
People at a ground level have quite a good understanding of their day-to-day finances. I mean, actually a lot of financial literacy work goes around, how do I balance my personal budget and so on. There's a lot of quite good stuff around it. Actually, people are quite good at that. What tends to be missing from a lot of financial education, for example, you would never find this in schools, is any kind of education around the political dynamics of the financial sector and actually the philosophy that underpins it. For example, what even is investment supposed to be for?
Well, I read you said you'd like to see the financial system more like Wikipedia. How so?
Well, Wikipedia is an example of an open source platform. You can see a few different features of Wikipedia. On the one sense, it's open to people participating, so you could actually go in and produce stuff on Wikipedia. So in a sense, there's a lot of work to be done on opening up the production of financial services to the average person, for example, through things like peer-to-peer finance. On the other hand, Wikipedia is also something that has widespread access. So there's a whole lot of work around financial inclusion. How do you expand access to the financial system? And then there's a third element of this analogy with Wikipedia is that it has a transparency process or an accountability process where people can contest changes.
So in essence, you're talking about a free-for-all, maybe even getting rid of regulators. Might we not see a Snowden situation?
The point is you want to create a more diverse financial system. So right now your system that we have is very passive consumers of financial services, then these quite aggressive financial intermediaries, and then regulators that have to try and keep the financial intermediaries under control. You would actually want to try to create more of a balance between regulators, smaller financial institutions, and more citizen power in the process.
Your book talks of zones of finance that feel intuitively wrong to a lot of people. What are we looking at exactly?
People have a sense that the financial sector is this kind of mysterious thing outside of themselves, and they think about Canary Wharf and these big towers. And part of that's because, again, this issue of financial literacy, but also there's a lot of things that the financial industry does that are very large scale and quite opaque and complex. It gives a sense of alienness to it.
But isn't this with any industry? The layman doesn't understand, most industries, so why does it even matter?
It's true. For example, we don't understand necessarily how the bridge that goes across the river stays up because we haven't studied engineering and so on. But on average, it seems to work, and in a way it doesn't affect our day-to-day lives, the fact that we don't necessarily understand that. I would argue personally that in the realm of finance, people's day-to-day lives are constantly impacted by this, and they're constantly having to interact with the financial sector in quite a personal way. So that lack of understanding has a lot more problematic dynamics, especially considering the fact that the financial industry has played such an important part in the overall economy, and it has a lot of political power. Not understanding it continues to help it get that political power in Westminster and other places.
You referred to an unspoken class cohesion between financial professionals and politicians who attend the same universities. So are you suggesting a problem with our education system rather than isolating just one section of society?
The political power that the financial sector has within, say, the UK economy, there's a lot of class dynamics to that. The same person who is a fund manager also probably happens to be friends with people who are politicians. So to some extent, there's a class analysis that you can do, and that obviously links up to education in this country. For example, Oxbridge did a master's degree in Cambridge University, and certainly in Cambridge University there's a very big implicit understanding that what happens there is that some people go to become politicians, some people go to become financiers or accountants or lawyers, so the very high-end stuff, and then others go into other things. But there's a definite sense that these universities bring together this sort of elite class cohesion.
So how do you foresee the landscape of the financial industry in the future?
It's very hard to know what will happen. There's so many chaotic different forces in the world. I think one thing you could definitely say is that there's a generational change occurring over time. So for example, a lot of the sort of management level in banks right now were educated, say, in the 1970s or 1980s. They had certain attitudes about the world. The new generations that are sort of like now moving up the management ranks of banks have different viewpoints. They tend to be more liberal. They tend to have more understanding of environmental issues. That's a positive trend. I think like it's going to be hard to see banks of the future not caring about, say, sustainability, although you don't know how long that will take. On the other hand, there's also this element of technology, huge big data technologies to sort of crunch consumer profiles and target people and so on. So those are some potential trends.